All right. Hello. Welcome back to the podcast to all of the podcast listeners and anybody watching live in the Ayurveda Soul Sister Tribe Facebook group. Hello and welcome. Today, I have, for the second time, the amazing Sharon Joy, and I've asked her back because she's always such a joy to speak to. And yeah, I really loved our last conversation we had on the podcast. So this is actually her second time on my podcast, which is exciting. And we're going to be talking about being a force for positive change in the coaching industry and balancing the masculine and feminine energy. And they might sound like two very different topics, but Sharon is going to be able to weave them in for us so that everyone can get a lot out of this episode. Sharon is a business and life coach and the woman behind Sharon Joy Coaching, helping coaches, healers, and soulful consultants in the early stages of their business get clear and go from swirling to solid. She is the host of the Joyous Journeys in Life and Business podcast and holds a Diploma of Neuro-Linguistic Programming, so that's NLP, and strategic coaching. She uses a perfect blend of strategy and alchemy in her coaching to help clients overcome blocks that hold them back from becoming who they desire to be, tune into their deepest desires, and get out of their own way in order to bring their dream online business to life. So welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you. Hi, everyone.
Thank you so much for being here. She's like superwoman. She's at her daughter's dance to Stedford. Is it a dance to Stedford that you're at?
It is.
And yes. I was like, no, we don't. She's like, it's all right, I've just done their makeup. I'll just come into the car and do the podcast and then I'll go back and watch her. I'm like, oh my God, woman.
Multitasking. But, isn't that why we create these kinds of businesses?
That is
That's
true.
exactly why we do it, because we can do this, and there's times where we need to have that singular focus and just focus on our family or our kids. But there's other times when it's like, no, I can do both today. So absolutely. Lots of balls in the air, but that's, for me, that's actually, I used to be the teacher. So I used to be in there doing the teaching, and now I'm like, I'm just going to grab a coffee and go record a podcast now. See ya.
Yeah, awesome. And be back just for the performance. Miss all the
exactly.
Other. Yeah.
Exactly. I just get to pick and choose the bits I want to do now.
I love that. I so love that. Now, as you know, I always start my episodes with the rapid inspiration question. So you've already probably answered these in the last podcast, but sometimes things change.
Could be different.
Exactly. We reevaluate ourselves and we're learning new things about who we are or what's inspiring us. So I'm going to ask you again.
Great.
Can you inspire us with what your superpower is?
My superpower is clarity, I'm told. So it's probably the number one thing that clients tell me is that I help them get clear. And I don't know how I do it. Sometimes it's really hard to sort of actually, I do know how I do it. I do it through clever questioning. I think the thing is yes, I've got a diploma in NLP, but I've also got 16 years of education. So as a teacher, being able to ask those questions to get the juice, it has been it's been part of my craft and my profession, and so I've carried that on and moved into being somebody who's trained in NLP, but I also think it's part of my human design, being a projector. So actually being able to help people get clear is definitely my superpower. So I'm told.
And that's what is James Wedmore says, the quality of your life is based on the quality of the questions that you ask yourself. I love that.
That's so true. I still need people to hold the container for me, to ask the questions of me sometimes. As you know, I've been in containers with you, around the places and spaces where I've needed somebody to hold that container for me and ask the questions, because I think sometimes when we're in it, it's much harder to do for ourselves. But gee, that's true. That is so true.
Yeah, absolutely. We've always got to, have that person to be, because it's so easy to see, to help. I can give like my clients, like my business coaching clients or my health coach, all these ideas and, can clearly see it structured for them. But when it comes to yourself, you get in your own way because you get in your head. And then it's really hard to get that clarity, even if you have a lot of the tools, and you just sometimes need someone where you can just speak and flesh it out and get your ideas out and bounce off each other. And I think when you're in like a soul business, it can be really lonely in that fact you don't have, if you don't have the support, if you're not in a coaching container, or have really supportive people that understand entrepreneurship, then it can be really difficult to get out of your own way, to get to the next step, and to be really clear on your offerings, and also to pull you back into line, especially if you're a Vata type person like myself. I'm like, oh, so many ideas, I can do it all, like this is amazing. And then you just need that a bit more Peter structure coming in and being like, hey, hold it back.
Definitely. So. And like, just to echo that, I absolutely couldn't agree more that being in a community of other entrepreneurs who are in similar industries to you is absolutely pivotal to success. There's no way that that I would have come as far as I've come in the time, in the last 2 years especially, if I hadn't been in the right communities. And can I just say that sometimes takes a while to learn, to decide and work out which communities that you should be a part of. And probably, and I know we're streaming into the Facebook group while we're recording this, but I say to my clients, be in the free Facebook groups, but also make sure that you're in paid communities of other entrepreneurs as well, because there is a difference. There's more skin in the game, and the quality of feedback that you get, they are other aligned people who are invested in their development, and that being in that community is absolutely essential.
And I think that's true for not only like business, but whatever your goal is. So if your goal is like health related goals, or balancing hormones, or whatever that might be, it's being in that
intimacy, relationship,
totally,
absolutely, 100%. Like I know that I've been in lots of different containers, and when I'm invested in it, I mean, even around money, like if you want to reach higher with your financial goals or understand your numbers better, if you want to improve your money mindset, like you can read all the books in the world, you can be in all the free groups, you can do all the free challenges, all of the things, and yes, it will help to a point, but when you reach that point of actually investing, then it's definitely more transformational. Totally. More skin in the game.
Transformation is in the transaction. Well, these are rapid inspiration questions. They're not very rapid.
Well, we do get on a little bit of a high horse.
How we roll.
We like to riff these things out, Harmony.
What's your favourite quote or mantra at the moment? Is there anything that you're going by?
Oh, yeah. Look, it always has to be, you're only ever one decision away from a completely different life. That's always been, that's always been my truth, and it's been the thing that drove me to make my complete life flip back in 2017, and it is just so true for me. You are only ever one small decision away from a completely different life.
Well, I'm actually going to use that to lead into our first question, which was, you have made a complete transition from being a school principal to running your
deputy, but close enough.
Okay.
Ran the school plenty of times, but deputy principal.
All right, deputy principal to running your own online coaching business. So I would love for you just to share a little bit about that journey, and why you've said you're only one decision away from a new life, like how that played into that journey for you.
So I'll probably start by saying, for not only myself, but I know the truth of many women that I speak to, and also hundreds of traveling families that I've spoken to, and I mean hundreds, usually somewhere between 35 and 42 is in terms of lots of philosophies around the world, that is when our third eye chakra opens. It's when the 7-year life cycle, there's a whole lot of philosophies that something happens in that time. And I was, I lost my mum at 35 when I was 35 years of age. She passed away of ovarian cancer, and that started me on a path of challenging my life to live differently. And I was 20 weeks pregnant with my third child, my son, when mum died. And so, that was a really tough time. I don't have siblings, so I had to navigate that. It was really difficult. My dad then got sick straight after, at the same time my son was born. And, there was a lot of things during that time. And, when I started to, after I'd had all of that, I started to look at life differently. And then we had our 3 children, and we created a great life. Like, we had an amazing life. But I started to think, well, okay, we've got the house, we're very, very happily married, we've got 3 amazing kids, we've both had great careers. And I was like, what now? And so all of a sudden I had this kind of, I guess you could say, this mortality, this idea of mortality, and just going, well, that means that this is it now until we retire. We're just on this hamster wheel. And I wasn't happy with that. So, that's when we started to really challenge the status quo. And when we challenged the status quo, we started to see that, there's other ways that we could live. We challenged the idea that we didn't have to live in a big city anymore, that we could live by the beach in a coastal regional area. We live near Coffs Harbour. And, I started to think with teaching that I didn't want to teach forever. I didn't want to be teaching when I was nearly retired. And I'd seen the slip, the workload slip in education, much like people in health, like people, nurses, teachers. There's been this like ever slow slide where there's been this slippery slope of an increased workload, increased stress, increased accountability beyond what's fair and reasonable, because we're not making the decisions, we're not the decision makers, and yet there was like this push down. And so I wasn't happy with that, and decided that I was still young enough to retrain. And so I was 38. It was we decided, I was about to turn 38, and we just woke up one day and I just said, I think I've worked this out. We're going to travel Australia in a caravan. We're going to leave Sydney, and we're going to settle on the mid-north coast, which is where we wanted to settle. And
I love that. That's I love that. I've worked it out. We're getting a caravan and traveling. I love that. I love it so much.
Like a light bulb, like an absolute light bulb moment. And we were on holidays at the time in our old caravan. And it just hit me like a lightning bolt. And I knew in that moment exactly what we needed to do, because we were planning on traveling anyway, but I knew we couldn't go back to that life. I just knew it was not going to fulfill us, and that we'd feel crap. So I didn't want to put myself in that situation. I wanted more inspiration. I was craving that. I felt really trapped. And I'd always lived in the city, so the idea of moving to a regional area was really scary for me. But all of a sudden, it's a place that we holidayed every year. And I just thought we would say all the time, we could live here. And then we started to make all these excuses why we couldn't, why we shouldn't, until that one summer where we actually looked at ways that we could. And because we were on holidays, in the area at the time, we started looking at properties straight away. We went home, we had an appointment with our real estate agent, and the house was on the market a matter of weeks later. So, and our brand new caravan was ordered within probably a week of us returning home. So, and that was 5 years ago now. So we traveled for 2 years and relocated here. It was my 38th birthday, was the last day that we were in Sydney, and I went in, it was the start of the year, but I went in and I said to my boss, I'm really sorry, I didn't see this coming. But as soon as I can get out of here, I'm going on long service leave, and then I'm going on leave without pay, and I'm never coming back. And he kind of just looked at me like, whoa. And then, it was my 38th birthday. I had the whole school there cheering me on as I walked through the arch, and I got home and I said to my husband, I think I've just done my last day of teaching. I'm ready to do something else.
I love that. That's what making me feel emotional. It's such a beautiful story. But I mean, I guess you're lucky in the fact that with that job you had that long service leave. Did that make you feel a little bit more confident to do it, to then be able to build your own business? Because I guess that's
Probably not,
no?
because the long service leave was needed for me to pack up our life. And basically, I mean, we'd been in that house for 17 years. So we had a lot of packing to do. We had a lot of clearing out to do. We had to, I mean, planning for a lap around Australia, I knew that that was going to be taking up a lot of my energy. And so I just got to work on that, and pretty much my long service was done by the time we set off on the road. But probably having the sale of our house behind us, and we purchased another home. We did, we were lucky that we did have some money behind us at that point in time. But, I think I've come to realize when I really went into this new phase of my business, because the business that I started initially back in 2018, I dabbled in some other things prior to that, but, it was a completely different business to what I've got now. But I've since realized that, starting an online business, there are ways that you can do it without the need for a large investment behind you. And that's certainly something that I show women how to do, is to start their business, and they don't necessarily have to have, truckloads of money behind them. They just need to be organized and committed and have a vision.
Amazing. So you're obviously a massive advocate for being a force for positive change in life, but also in the coaching industry. I know we've had some conversations around this. So what do you think actually needs to change in the coaching industry?
Yeah, well, a lot.
Where do I start?
A lot. Look, can I just say straight up, I love the coaching industry. The coaching industry has changed my life, and it changes people's lives every single day. But I also want to say that for every life it changes for the better, there are actually lives that it changes for worse. And, I mean, we know the nature of when we go through and start unpacking and doing the work. It is incredibly, at times, raw, and once you've unleashed that beast, you can't put it back in the box. When you know how to be curious about your thoughts and call yourself out on your own bullshit, you can't undo that learning. The beast is out, right? And so, I think that is something that, for a start, is making sure that people are safe. So there's stuff around, making sure that more people who are becoming coaches are more trauma informed. Making sure that there's that delineation between what's mental health and what is, I want to say, like, our own stories.
100%.
Okay.
Yes.
And knowing and understanding the difference there, so that people are safe. Creating safe and inclusive communities for people of color, for people who have, varying abilities. One of the things that I find is it's very much a case in the coaching industry, and with a lot of online programs, if you can't, if you're not neurotypical, stiff, bad luck. So, making sure that there's that support there for people who, have different types of neurodiversity. Having people of color in our programs, not culturally appropriating, making sure that, that there's balance, so that we can be evening things out here in society, not perpetuating, the patriarchal system that we're living in, looking at ways that we can deconstruct that. But I think, the most important one is also conscious selling, the way that people are selling things, making sure that, there's a level of conscious there, that it's ethical, not selling things to people who it's not right for, not spamming people, not harassing people, but just being in deep honoring of, of all types of people, and actually really doing the work to unpack our privilege all the time, like all the time. doing the work, being in social justice spaces, and, doing the work to unpack that.
Absolutely. And I guess I want to lead in where you were saying about conscious sales. And I think that is such an integral and important role that coaches need to play in business or just in life in general. And it's something that I teach as conscious business design to my business coaching clients, and even in my Ayurveda Alchemist program, because we have the modules at the end teaching you how to set up a business. And it is really about that conscious business design. Now, I do want to ask you, because I feel there's a lot of NLP practitioners going around, and I feel there's a lot of NLP practitioners using NLP for the wrong reasons and not and using it for a better word, I don't know, to explain sleazy sales or manipulating sales. So I would love for you to explain how you can use NLP for positive change.
Yeah, well, quite simply, I mean, I actually had reservations around getting a qualification in NLP because of that stigma. And that stigma is not a stereotype, it's the truth. There are people out there who do not use NLP ethically, and it's just not cool. Although I will say that I think people are becoming more awake to it now, and it's kind of like, hang on a minute, I'm getting, you're trying to mess with me here. So, absolutely, if anyone is ending up in those spaces where they're teaching those sorts of things, just run, because that's not where it's at. That's not, if you're a soul-led business person, then, that's not being heart-led, that's not being respectful of people. And, I'm a big believer in treating people the way that I want to be treated. And that might sound cliche, but heck, I certainly don't want to be treated that way. Where NLP is amazing is helping people reorganize their thinking, being able to see things from a different perspective in order to remove those blocks that they might have that are stopping them from getting them to where they actually want. And really, that's the best way to use it. So in coaching, it's about using those, framing those questions to be able to help people actually unpack that. That's one part, the questioning side of things. But there's also some wonderful tools that can help people that, I guess you could say and here's the other thing. I mean, with NLP, I have to be honest, I've been in spaces with people say, oh yeah, I'm NLP trained, and these courses that have 50 gazillion modalities jammed into them, and they might have spent a few hours on NLP, that's not an NLP certification. I've spent in excess of 20 hours face-to-face, and then another 100 hours, of practice, and 500 hours of practice, if you like, and then 100 hours of, other study. And I think that, to do NLP well is not like, oh yeah, I know something about it, and I know it's about clever questioning and things like that. It's having like a toolkit where you can actually use the proper practices, much like hypnosis, where, you can say, all right, we're having this, right, let's go into this situation. So there's there's some similarities between, high quality hypnosis and NLP, but I guess, hypnosis can be a little bit the same. There's so many trainings out there now that, I would say to anybody looking at those modalities, just do your research on where you're getting your qualifications. I studied at the Institute of Applied Psychology in Sydney under Gordon Young. And, he's 6 degrees away from, where the, NLP was actually started. And the toolkit that I have as a result of that is incredible. I can pull things out according to where that client's at, using things like submodalities to help people shape and shift their thoughts. Do they have colors? Do they have distance? Are they inside the vision or are they outside of it? Is it panoramic? Is it, small and in the distance? Is it behind you? All of these things. Do they have colors? Do they have shapes? Do they have textures? This lends itself to ways that people think and construct thinking. And when we know how people can construct thinking, if that's a block for them, then we can support them to reorganize that and, and correct it. Another great one with NLP when it's done well is values elicitation, helping people actually work out what their core values are. And that is incredibly helpful, because if there's a mismatch between someone's core values and what they actually think they want, then there's going to be a problem there. If money isn't one of their top 5 values, but they want more money in their business, it's not going to happen, because they're not going to put their time there because it's not in the top 5 values. But through NLP, we can reorganize that, because we can help people chunk it up and make it a priority, because the way that we construct thinking, we can attach that thing about money to something else that is in their top 5 values. So, it can be used as such an incredible modality when it's used well. Incredible. It's changed my life. But as I say, once that beast is out of the box, you can't stuff it back in. When you know how to say, oh yeah, that's a story, Sharon, and I know you're the same, Harmony, like, this, like, it's like you can hear your own bull, and so you've got to call yourself out on it. But that's sometimes like,
yeah.
Sometimes that we have those days where we want to sit in our own shit, I guess. We want to sit in it and, wallow in it and have a little pity party. But that's when we're not actually leading ourselves, right? We're not leading ourselves. And, I love that saying, your responsibility, your ability to respond is your responsibility.
Wonderful. And yeah, thank you so much for clarifying how wonderful like NLP can be, because I think there is such a stigma with it. Even myself, someone in a Facebook group, because I do like Ayurvedic psychology sessions and getting to those limiting beliefs and all of that, and it's got nothing to do with NLP. I've never done NLP training, and someone had written, oh, what NLP training have you done or something, and I was like, oh no not associated with NLP, not me. So I do Ayurvedic psychology.
And I get it. I absolutely get. And and I guess when it comes to being a change in the industry, there's another example. It's speaking out against, having these tools that we have. And I mean, you could say the same for hypnosis. You can say the same for any kind of removing of limiting beliefs. It's a point of bifurcation where we get that point of weakness and then we can deflect. It's the same strategy that people use when they're getting people to join cults, right? It's the same thing as the language of cults. It can be used as a force of evil, and not all cults are evil, right? Cults is, the definition of cults is quite broad. It doesn't necessarily associate with something negative, but most people associate the word cult with something negative. So speaking to that kind of realm, the truth is that, when it comes to using these tools, they can be used either way. And so again, being part of the change is making sure that there's consent, right? There's consent. There has to be consent, and that it's done in a way, like, I could be using NLP all the time with my clients, but I don't. I ask for consent. Yes, I use the questioning. That's part of, I use that with my children, to help them look at situations that they might have had at school or at dancing or at soccer critically, right? To think, being able to think critically. But, it's about receiving that consent, asking for consent before we just shoot on through and start to, essentially like change people's thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely.
Some people aren't ready to let go of their limiting beliefs. That's the truth.
No, because they feel safe in those limiting beliefs. They're not having to break through that safety network, and what's uncomfortably comfortable for them is to get there. Yeah.
And I know that myself, there's ones that I'm not willing yet to let go of, and that's okay. We all have them.
Absolutely. And I think just to flow in off the back of this conversation is I'd like to discuss some red flags with coaching. Now, I just want to say, like, with all the NLP stuff, I found that a lot of people may have these really deep-seated traumas that they've been drawn to these type of modalities to to get themselves, and then they learn it, and they haven't really dealt with their own traumas, or they haven't sort of worked on themselves to, I feel, enough to hold space for other people, yet they're going and starting their own sort of unqualified business
coaching practice
process. And then that's when they do all the questioning, they get people to a certain stage, but then they can't hold the space after that. That's where it all comes down. And I think that's what you're talking about, being really responsible with the questions that you ask and the modalities that you have learned. So I would love to go into red flags. If you've got any coaching red flags for people to be mindful of when they're looking.
Definitely the gaslighting. Definitely gaslighting. You know, I mean, here's the thing. Like, I don't believe that anybody goes into a business like this for the wrong reasons. You know, I think people go into it because they want to help other people. You know, I truly believe that the majority of people who start these sorts of businesses want to go in, like very often they've got a story, right? Whether there was some rejection story from parenthood or a, you know, relationship, you know, some sort of trauma is often what leads people to this point of having a business. So you're right. You know, often they haven't worked through it, but often that they think they have, which is fair, because do we ever really know when we've completely unpacked all of it? I don't know. I feel like it's a life's work, not a season's work. We're always unpacking it, but having those tools. I think where people come unstuck is that, you know, probably around gaslighting. You know, it's sort of like placing blame on other things. But that's because they're not able to accept that we can't fix people.
Yeah. Yes.
It's not up to us to fix. And so coming at it from a place of blame kind of feels safe, because they're like, oh, like, get the monkey off my back. But in actuality, it's an inability just to be able to hold the space. And there's something incredibly powerful about, like, to a point of healing, being held, being well held. And, you know, I'm very fortunate to, you know, be a client of and have as a client Julie Tenner, who's amazing, an amazing human. And, you know, I know that I've been able to watch and learn from her about her ability to hold space for people. And I think the more that we can expand our own ability to be able to hold that intensity, and that might mean long, awkward silences, where energetically we can hold somebody. It doesn't have to result in anything. We don't have to reach a point of result all the time.
I guess that's what I was getting at before. Maybe I didn't articulate it as well, but people that haven't worked through the traumas, like not that, because I guess, you're right. There's never sort of this end point, because these beliefs are always going to come up. But people who can't hold space for themselves yet are trying to hold that space for someone else in that similar position. That's really hard. If you haven't worked on being able to hold yourself and ask yourself those, you know, like we spoke about before, asking yourself the quality of those questions and know how to sit with that and answer them truthfully. And then if you can't do that for yourself, it's really hard to do it for someone else, because you will get triggered and you won't know how to then be a professional and appropriate in that space.
100%. You know, I think that level of discomfort that can come through for somebody who hasn't expanded that ability, like, it's an art, right? Being able to hold space for other people is an art form. You know, I know that, you know, like, there have been times where I've been at that point of frustration and impatience. And, you know, I've got to check myself and say, you know, am I projecting here? Like, I need to actually just recenter myself in order to be able to hold that person. And it's definitely an art. Like, there's an art to it. And, you know, I think it can be very difficult if we don't have the right tools to be able to empty, as coaches and holders of space, to be able to empty out ourselves, right? Like having those tools that we use on a regular basis, those practices that allow us to be able to empty out in order to make space to be able to hold that for others.
Absolutely. Well, I think I would love to switch the convo a little bit to balancing the masculine and feminine energy in order to balance different aspects of your life. So whether that's in your business, your job, or a role as a mother, a wife, friends, whatever that is. So first, can you explain what masculine versus feminine energy means? Because I think the meaning of it is very different to other people.
It really is. And I think, you know, there's different interpretations of it. But I always think of the masculine as the doing and the feminine as the being. So, you know, I love that idea that, I actually have a tattoo on my wrist that says, be the joy. And, you know, it's like, who am I being when I'm doing? So, you know, it's really that idea of, you know, who am I being? And that is the feminine when I'm doing. And if we can balance those two things, then when we're doing, we're less likely to be, for lack of a better word, penetrating, you know, like going through like a wrecking ball. We're able to carry ourselves, you know, in a way that is, you know, I guess you could say also too, like that, you know, that positive masculine energy, not toxic masculine energy, but, you know, carrying and leading ourselves. But there's also this beautiful softness to it as well, which is the feminine. So, you know, I think when it comes to life and business or whatever it is that we're doing, it's having those masculine structures to what we're doing, but allowing spaciousness for the softness to come through rather than always coming from that place of force. It's allowing us to, you know, lean back into those soft confines of the structures that we've set up for ourselves. So, you know, I guess just to take a really practical example is, you know, I have 8 clarity pillars that I have my clients work through and understand that they can revisit at any time. And the second pillar, like after the connect to vision as the first, the second pillar is calendar. And I think that that's so important because how we master our time, you know, allows us to have that masculine and feminine. So it's, you know, it's blocking time, but it's not, you know, overfilling our calendar so that there is that spaciousness. There's that ability to be able to lean back, to feel organized, to not feel like we're chasing our tail. And then that's where we get to, you know, we get to let our feminine flow.
Absolutely. And a lot of the ancient philosophies, so whether we're speaking Ayurveda or traditional Chinese medicine, they talk about, I guess, the masculine and the feminine. So in Ayurveda, we talk about the Purusha and the Prakriti, the energies, the masculine and feminine energies, TCM, it's the yin and the yang, right? And it's really that we need a balance to balance both of those energies to create balance in our mind, body, soul, life, you know. So it's not, it's about noticing which one you're in and being able to modulate them so that you're creating more of the balance. It's not about, oh, I have to completely be this feminine all the time and in the flow state and manifesting and all this. And that serves a purpose. Fantastic.
Let's talk about that.
But you do need that real life action structure as well, and organization and a bit of routine, because that actually grounds you and it controls like the Vata energy. It controls the feminine energy, but the feminine also softens the masculine energy or the yang energy. So
100%. You know, so often I have clients who have been in, you know, floaty feminine coaching spaces, where business, you know, feminine business coaching spaces. And they have been in there and, you know, they've been told just whatever you feel like, it's all about the feeling and, you know, all of this. The trouble with that is not everybody has the ability to discern feeling or limiting beliefs for a start. So often when they start off on that path, they can be all floaty and feeling driven, but actually they end up stuck. The other thing that can happen, and I work a lot with human design, particularly I work a lot with manifesting generators for people who know a bit about human design. I'm a projector, so we're a perfect fit. Are you a Manny, Jenny?
Yeah.
So that's why we get along so well. We're just a perfect fit.
Yeah.
So, I work with a lot of manifesting generators, and what I tend to find is, there's so many things that they want to do because they're feeling this and they're feeling that, and they go off in these tangents, but then without having the discipline to balance the masculine and feminine, what they end up with is that feminine flood. And so the other thing is they alienate people in their audience because people can't keep up with that, and they're like, what are you doing now? Like, I don't know what you're doing. So, and then that's when everybody else kind of goes, you've lost me, But I think it's really important that, we build those masculine structures, and it's like the riverbanks. So within that, when we've got those beautiful riverbanks, that we can create that stream, that flow stream that we can get in. And, it allows for that fluidity, that softness. I think so often, I call myself as being in the messy middle, because I've been in those, very hyper masculine, patriarchal business spaces that have like women in them. But then I've also been in those very feminine, floaty spaces, and I've realized that both of them can be incredibly polarizing. So, sitting in the middle where, yes, the feeling matters, like there is that sense of feeling good, but also there's that discernment and actually cultivating those skills of discernment to go, well, is this about the feeling, or is this trauma in my body that's coming up to keep me safe unnecessarily, right? And when you have that ability to move between both, and there's an art to it, there's no doubt about it. The other thing I would say is, having a partner who also understands that can be incredible. So, I have a masculine partner. I'm a feminine core being, although I have a very well cultivated masculine. And so, and I also am neurodivergent. So I have ADHD, and I can be very inclined to hyperfocus. And when I hyperfocus, what happens is that results in a whole lot of masculine energy. Funny enough, what ends up happening then is I get things like sore boobs and, like I feel like really funky. It's just, all of the feminine things start to go wrong because I don't have that softness in my body. But having a masculine partner who understands and can recognize those signs, he's able to rise higher in his masculine and actually help me to soften so that I can return back to my true state. I love it.
Yeah, and so we spoke about, obviously, you've touched on both masculine and feminine energy and how they can cause issues if you're too much one way. And I think
100%.
The masculine energy, what I see is like a lot of burnout because there's too much like force and structure and having to get things right. That stress and that
nervous system frying.
Yeah, and that high pivot energy, and it can definitely lead to burnout. But I love that analogy that you put together of the masculine riverbank sort of holding that feminine energy, because really even going back to those traditional ancient wisdoms of Ayurveda and TCM is that the masculine and the feminine, they're interdependent. So they coexist together for a reason. And that's what creates that balance, is when you can really get into that co-creation and coexisting of the two different energies and allow them to play out in your life, and notice when one is too much and the other maybe not so much, and learning how, well, where can I let go? Like if you're living too much in that masculine and you've always got a schedule and you're always like driving and striving for success, and you're starting to feel really burnt out and confused, and then you like got to think with the feminine energy, like where can I let go? Where can I soften? Where can I just allow things to be? And then if you're too, I guess, floating around with that feminine and just feeling like nothing's really getting achieved and feeling a bit confused in that way, then you need more of that grounding, earthy, sort of masculine, solid energy to come into play.
Definitely. I think, like if anyone's sort of not sure about, where they're sitting, I think you're right. If you are on that more on that masculine side, and this is fluid, right? It's like a sliding scale that we slip up and down even in the course of our day. I think what a lot of women don't realize is they become mothers, and then they've got so much more masculine energy than what they ever had before, because mothering is a masculine energy. And I think a lot of women don't realize that. They think that there's something beautiful and nurturing, and yes, there is. But, in modern days in the Western world, we're not parenting our young children and our older children, for that matter, in a way that is necessarily feminine. It's masculine energy most of the time, because it's family Inc., right? It's like, right, we've got to do all the things. But, if people want to sort of a little bit of a checkpoint to check themselves, definitely if they're feeling burnt out, tiredness, feeling stressed, feeling tension in their body, like where we're locked up and blocked up, that's definitely an oversupply of masculine. And on the other side, if they're feeling very overwhelmed by everything to the point of collapse, then that tends to be, more like too much feminine energy. And there's a requirement there to recalibrate and put some supports in place to be able to, like build the riverbanks, basically.
Love it. I absolutely love it. Well, you have once again come up with so much gold and amazing information and enlightening conversation for us, and a lot of things,
I love chatting to you.
A lot of things to make us think, and to get into those sort of conversations when we're not just sitting on the edge. I just love how honest and transparent you are, and not afraid to speak your truth. And I think that's a really honorable quality that you have. And I think that's actually one of your superpowers is to be able to speak your truth and articulate it really fairly and really openly. So I love that about you. Before we go, thank you. But before we go, do you have any parting words that you would like to share? And also, can you share where we can find you?
Parting words, I guess, for your listeners, people who are practitioners or, looking at starting businesses, I think one of the things that I've been talking about a lot at the moment is, there's a lot of information out there about, don't follow someone's blueprint, or don't follow this step-by-step thing, and again, this sort of comes like, there's this idea on the feminine side in feminine coaching circles that sort of points to that as being wrong and hyper masculine. And I just want to say, for people who are learning anything new, people, maybe you've been a practitioner in one discipline and you want to move to something else, or maybe you've been a yoga teacher and you want to start a coaching business on the side or something like that. I want those women in business just to know that if you are learning something new, then you don't need to recreate the wheel. Yes, there will be that point where you can experiment and throw away the rule book and because you'll have the experience. But when you are learning, please, don't prolong your success. Grab someone's blueprint, grab someone's, checklist or whatever it is, and run with it. Don't get all the free things from everybody. Just choose a few people that you really want to resonate with, and start to look at, their ways and means and implement that. And, I liken this very much to my 17-year-old daughter is learning to drive. Now, we've traveled Australia. She's spent hours and hours and hours sitting in a vehicle. She knows which parts of the vehicle are what. She knows where the indicator, the brake, the accelerator, the radio, the wipers, all of the things. She's got a lot of experience in being in a vehicle, but it's very different when you hand her the keys and say, right, now you operate it. And a business is the same. So even if you've been, say, in a yoga business and you've ran your own business before, maybe you haven't had your own business, but you've worked for somebody else, you've got business experience, but driving that thing might be a completely different experience. So get the right help. Reject this idea that, 16 years in education, I can tell you that the way people learn is we give them a framework. Yeah. Then once they've they've learnt those foundational steps, then they can get off and be creative, right? But when we start, it's like when we teach our kids to learn to walk. You know, we give them the guidance. First, you got to put your hands here. Then you pull yourself up to standing. Then you try and get your balance. Then you might take one step and fall down, you know, or you walk from, you know, the lounge to the coffee table. These are things that we've broken them down, like teaching my daughter how to drive. You know, we turn it on, we put the seatbelt on, we find the brake, you know, all of the key things. And that I just think it's so important that don't reject that, because it's the way that you will learn and it will accelerate your success. By all means, kick that to the curb when you've got the confidence to be able to go, no, I'm going to throw out the rule book. Also, throw out the rule book when you've got that recurring revenue. Don't throw out the rule book when you're just almost there and then you decide to burn it down. You know, keep what you're doing and then add to it, you know, rather than toss it all out and confusing your audience. So with that, if people would like to follow me, or if they would like to get their hand on my ultimate startup checklist for coaches, healers, and soulful consultants, so anyone working in the parenting, birthing, doula, matrescent space, jump on over to sharonjoycoaching.com/startup. And you can download my 14-page startup checklist. It's got 8 pillars, the 8 pillars that I talked about that I use to help women get clear and get organized to get moving on their business. And also it's got over 30 links of tips and tools and lots of things that they can get access to. So you can find me there. And also, of course, on Instagram at Sharon Joy Coaching. Would love to connect with anyone who's been listening. Would love to know your takeaways. Jump on over, drop me a DM, say g'day.
Awesome, amazing. Thank you so much again, Sharon. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Always a pleasure. Always a pleasure, Harmony. Thank you so much for having me on, and love listening to your podcast.
Oh, thank you. And yours, likewise. Thank you, everybody else, for listening. Bye.